Tonight, a dire warning for Canada's climate. The country is warming twice as fast as the rest of the world.
We need to take action on climate change.
Just as a Liberal carbon tax hits 4 provinces, we break it down.
I do not believe that I should be removed from caucus.
She's still a Liberal, but for how long?
We have a real problem that I don't feel safe in caucus.
Inside the party, mounting pressure to remove Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott.
It's heartbreaking because it is absolutely not true.
Soaked your iPhone? Apple may tell you your photos and data are lost for good. But is it true? This is The National.
According to virtually every climate scientist, climate change is already here. Temperatures have risen and are expected to keep rising with dramatic and increasingly disastrous impacts. And today, we are learning that in Canada, that goes double. A government report from Environment and Climate Change Canada, years in the making, confirms that Canada is warming at twice the rate of the rest of the world. Far from being a safe haven, Canada has been directly in the climate crosshairs, and barring drastic global action, more is coming. Today, the government imposed a carbon tax on 4 provinces, representing just under half Canada's population. Part of the Liberal plan to combat climate change. You'll hear about that in a moment, but first, Salima Shivji has the details of today's climate report.
A comprehensive report laying out the stark reality. These majestic glaciers are thinning rapidly. Snow and ice disappearing, all because Canada is getting much warmer, especially in the winter, with the highest rates of warming seen in the prairies, northern BC, and especially the Arctic, where it's 2.3 degrees warmer on average than it was about 70 years ago. The rest of the country is 1.7 degrees warmer, twice the global average. That means more rain, storm surges, sea levels rising, all of which translates into more chances of devastating flooding. Expect droughts leading to forest fires. Much of this damage, the report says, driven by human activity and largely irreversible.
If our warming is modified, the snow and sea ice loss will reduce. For glaciers, this is not the case. They are a slow response part of the climate system.
The authors are banking on the science, sounding the alarm of just how bad it could get.
We are on a warming trajectory. We're looking at warm or warmer, which means that there are choices ahead of us in terms of where to place our efforts.
For some, this is confirmation of what was already suspected.
Therefore, we have to adapt. We have to prepare for this. We have to prepare our homes, our cities, existing cities, new cities to be built. We have to build them in such a way that we anticipate flooding, that we anticipate fires, that we anticipate extreme heat.
The report models possible futures, but it doesn't set out a path for how to stop the warming.
The science is very clear, it is very detailed and powerful, and now the political decision makers have to respond. Canada has never met a climate target it has set. It has been setting climate targets since 1992 and has missed every one.
She says so far we're on track to miss another one. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now, on the same day that serious climate report was made public, a Trudeau government policy billed as part of a climate solution kicked in 4 provinces, and people have already noticed at the pump.
Carbon tax, right?
Yes.
Which is not fair, I think, in my opinion.
Carbon tax? Absolute disgrace.
I actually didn't realize how much difference there was going to be between yesterday and today.
As part of its national plan to put a price on carbon, the Trudeau government imposed its federal carbon tax on provincial holdouts that don't have their own plans: Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and New Brunswick. It starts at $20 per ton. For gas, that means an extra 4.4 cents per litre. But the tax ratchets up every year until 2022, when it more than doubles. And the costs on fossil fuels will also filter down to all kinds of products. There's a tax rebate designed to offset those costs, but for those gassing up today, the sticker shock is real.
My income really hasn't changed, so I will definitely notice it.
So how is the carbon tax, and the rebate for that matter, supposed to work? Peter Armstrong gives us the nuts and bolts.
The whole idea here is to use pricing to change behavior, something that already happens all the time.
When one vacation costs more, we look at others. When one kind of vegetable costs more because of a price spike, we look for alternatives.
In this case, it's the price of goods and services that cause greenhouse gas emissions. Gas for your car, home heating fuel, natural gas. Consider the cost of gasoline. The best-selling vehicle in Canada is the Ford F-Series pickup truck. A carbon tax means an extra $3.80 to fill it up. For the best-selling car, tack on another $1.98 per fill-up. So that's the cost. But remember, the government will send money back to families as well. Imagine a bar where the price of a certain beer goes up by $5, but the bar is giving out $5 bills. You can still buy that more expensive beer and use that rebate to cover the additional expense, or you can pocket the $5 and buy a different, less expensive beer. It's the same premise with the carbon tax rebate. A higher price, but a chance to pocket extra cash if consumers find a cheaper way to get around or heat their homes and businesses. But what choices do consumers really have? Well, they could buy a more fuel-efficient car or furnace. Some could use more public transit.
But the whole point is not to be prescriptive. It's not to determine in the rooms of government which is the right way for each of us to reduce our emissions.
That rebate varies across Canada, but the projected cost is less than the rebate in every scenario. And advocates say the math has already been borne out. British Columbia has had a carbon tax in place for more than a decade. Its economic growth is the best in Canada. People are driving more fuel-efficient cars, and they're driving less. And since BC's carbon tax was introduced in 2008, emissions have fallen up to 15% from where they would have been. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Okay, now for the politics. For the 4 provinces hit with a fresh tax in an election year, this is good wedge politics for both sides, both provincially and federally. Conservatives see some opportunity. The 4 provinces hit by the carbon tax today are all run by Conservative premiers. All oppose the tax. Ontario and Saskatchewan are actually fighting it in the courts.
It doesn't work. It taxes our jobs. It taxes our families.
Our government is going to fight the Trudeau Liberal carbon tax with every tool at our disposal.
And nationally, the Liberals may have just given the opposition an election year applause line.
My first act as Prime Minister will be to scrap Justin Trudeau's carbon tax.
But on the flip side, Liberals may welcome a fight on the environment.
Pollution has been free. We need to put a price on it.
The carbon tax is a potential winner for voters who care about climate, not to mention a stark contrast with those who have yet to announce a plan.
We're focused, quite frankly, on Canadians whose houses are flooded, who are being impacted by extreme heat, who are concerned about climate change, and want to do their part and want to make sure that it's done in a way that actually works.
And with the SNC affair on a rolling boil, the Liberals may view any change of subject as a good thing. But as you can imagine, SNC remained in the headlines again today, as Jody Wilson-Raybould made it clear that she believes she should remain in Liberal caucus. Here's a look of Parliament tonight, where some of her colleagues have been clamoring to remove her. Katie Simpson takes us inside the tumultuous party politics.
You recorded a conversation?
A defiant Jody Wilson-Raybould is standing by her actions and her party.
I do not believe that I should be removed from caucus for doing my job and doing what I believe is right.
What is right, she says, was her controversial decision to secretly record a conversation between her and the clerk of the Privy Council.
I believe that it was a reasonable, rational thing to do in an unreasonable and an irrational situation.
But some of her colleagues could not disagree more, and momentum is building for her to be kicked out of caucus.
The revelation of her recorded conversation on Friday was extremely disappointing to me. We have a real problem that I don't feel safe in caucus, and so I would want caucus to act.
Jody Wilson-Raybould?
Yeah.
Should be gone. Gone. Should have been gone long ago.
Sources tell CBC News high-level caucus phone calls and meetings are taking place to decide if Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott can remain Liberals.
I would like to move forward with Ms. Philpott and Ms. Wilson-Raybould in our caucus as contributors. Welcome and moving forward with us to talk about how we can continue the work we're doing.
I'm perfectly prepared to have them come before caucus and give an explanation and if they can persuade caucus as to why they should stay. But at this point, I don't see how that would happen.
The infighting continues to be a gift for the opposition.
I will be doing a marathon speech demanding the government end its cover-up of the SNC-Lavalin corruption scandal.
The Conservatives are now staging a multi-day filibuster to pressure the government into reopening the Justice Committee's investigation into this whole affair.
We are going to use every tool in the parliamentary toolkit to end the Prime Minister's cover-up and get to the truth.
Katie, that slow drip continues incredibly. What should we expect tomorrow, if anything?
There are two things that Canadians should be watching for, Rosie. The first is from Jerry Butts, a former top advisor to the Prime Minister. He submitted new information to the Justice Committee over the weekend in response to what Jody Wilson-Raybould had submitted on Friday. Those documents and whatever he submitted, that's expected to become public tomorrow. The other big thing to watch for has to do with caucus itself. Liberal caucus meets every Wednesday, and those caucus members need to decide whether Jody Wilson-Raybould and Jane Philpott are going to be welcome in that Wednesday meeting. If they decide to give them the boot, they might want to do it tomorrow before Wednesday's big meeting.
Okay, Katie Simpson in Ottawa again for us tonight. Thanks, Katie.
Thanks.
All right, well, from party infighting here in Canada, let's go to political turmoil in the UK. Ian, you've got the latest on Brexit.
That's right, Rosie. Failing to agree on anything seems to be the new normal in Britain's parliament. MPs there held non-binding votes on 4 Brexit strategies today and failed to reach a majority on any of them. That doesn't bode well. April 12th is right around the corner. That is the day the UK is supposed to leave the European Union. As Thomas Dagla tells us, what happens between now and then is anybody's guess.
This place sure feels stuck in a rut lately. Today, briefly, brought something completely different. Yes, the House of Commons got really cheeky. A dozen climate change activists stripping nearly naked while MPs tried their best to stay focused on Brexit.
The naked truth is, Mr. Speaker, that 202 members have loyally voted for the Prime Minister's deal.
Police detained the protesters, but their stunt just goes to show how, in Parliament now, turmoil rules, and it seems almost anything goes.
This process has been a shambles. Today we've got to start to bring that to an end.
In a bid to break the Brexit deadlock, MPs here were called on to vote on 4 options, including holding a second referendum and leaving while keeping economic ties to the EU, a so-called soft Brexit. All around Westminster, it's that last option that seems to be gaining momentum. But the Prime Minister shows no sign of switching plans or even listening, and neither do Brexiteers.
Well, I think customs union is a betrayal of Brexit.
When the Speaker emerged tonight, results in hand, the soft Brexit plans fell short.
The noes were 276, so the noes have it.
Every option failed, again raising the risk Britain will crash out with no better plan.
The default legal position is that the UK will leave the EU in just 11 days' time.
Conservative Nick Bowles got choked up, accusing the Tories of being unwilling to compromise.
I can no longer sit for this party.
Oh, Nick, don't go, come on.
A theatrical ending to another day of high drama. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, London.
MPs also debated a petition to stop Brexit altogether, which has garnered an astonishing 6 million signatures.
People are adamant that if we can't settle this in the House in a way that protects their interests, their jobs, their livelihoods, then revoke should be on the table.
At one point, the revoke petition was growing at a rate of 2,000 signatures a minute. The debate itself was symbolic, but the government did respond. We will not revoke Article 50, the statement read. We will honor the result of the 2016 referendum and work with Parliament to deliver a deal that ensures we leave the European Union. Here are some of the other stories we're watching tonight, starting in North Dakota, where police are looking for a suspect after 4 people were found dead inside a family-owned business.
It's very sad that there's people in this world that would do something, what we had to experience today.
Officers were called to the property management company this morning and found 3 men and a woman dead inside. They're calling it an isolated incident and don't believe anyone else is in danger. They're not saying how the 4 died, only that it's being investigated as a multiple homicide. Police have issued a Canada-wide warrant for 37-year-old Abdullahi Adon. They believe he's one of 4 people involved in the kidnapping of a 22-year-old international student, Wenjian Liu.
You know, motive is part of this ongoing investigation, and we're just not sure why this had taken place at this point in time. Obviously, our investigators have spoken with Mr. Liu, and I'm sure he's provided them with some great evidence, but we don't know the motive. Our focus right now is finding these suspects.
Police say Liu was grabbed from an underground parking lot in Markham on March 23rd. They say he was tased and thrown into a van. 3 days later, he was found alive almost 200 kilometers from where he was taken.
Still ahead on the National, meet the woman who's made a life rescuing data from broken iPhones, even though Apple says it's just not possible.
And exclusive details on how technology with a Canadian connection is making international flying safer.
Plus, an incredible story from BC. A mother pries open the jaws of a cougar to save her son, and Dad tells their story.
By that point, it had latched onto his forearm, and it obviously wasn't letting go. And so she jumps it, and then she's trying to pry its mouth off.
That's what moms do. How it all went down, still ahead.
A leap in technology with a boost from a Canadian company is promising to make transatlantic airline flights a little shorter, a little less expensive, and a little safer. A network of 66 satellites is allowing air traffic controllers to track planes with more accuracy than ever before. The official unveiling will be announced in Washington, D.C. tomorrow, but we have the exclusive details tonight. It may not look like it, but what's happening in this room, the Gander, Newfoundland Air Traffic Control Center, is a historic advance for aviation.
RAFM 1815 Delta 33.
For the first time anywhere, these controllers know the exact location of all of the planes on these screens, even jets halfway across the Atlantic. You may be surprised by this, but international flights are often beyond the reach of ground radar stations. In those places, and that's about 70% of the world, the planes update their locations only every 10 to 15 minutes. And because of that lack of detail, flights are kept far apart in the sky, up to 160 kilometers.
Ignition, liftoff of Falcon 9.
All of that changed with a series of SpaceX rocket launches, including this one last January, placing 66 satellites in low Earth orbit. Those satellites are powering a new navigation network called Aireon, partly owned by Navcan, the company responsible for air traffic control in this country. With Aireon, planes can automatically and continuously transmit their exact position, altitude, direction, speed, no matter where in the world they are. That stream of data is now being tested by controllers guiding planes across the North Atlantic.
You can't underestimate how important this is and how this changes how we will approach safe and efficient flight, not only in Canada, in Canadian airspace, but around the world.
Air traffic controllers can now reduce the separation between planes over the North Atlantic to just 25 kilometers. More efficient flight paths will save time and fuel. And it's not just people at Navcan, the part owner and early adopter, who are excited.
It's my opinion that this is as big of a change in aircraft tracking as radar was decades ago.
Howard Slutskin says beyond the benefits on routine flights, when things go wrong, precise tracking could be life or death.
If there's an emergency, search and rescue teams are going to be able to get there and know exactly where they're going, where before they were guessing in many cases. Time is of the essence, always in search and rescue.
But even in tragedies like the Ethiopian Airlines crash, where there were no survivors, it was Aerion that provided detailed information on the Boeing MAX 8's flight path that was available even before the data in the flight recorders would have been recovered. But it is the routine flights that carry the greatest benefit for this new system. NavCan estimates airlines will save about $400 in fuel for each transatlantic flight, and you can multiply that by up to 1,500 flights a day. And speaking of money, Rosemary, NavCan invested a lot, $200 million in this system, so it and the other owners of Aerion are hoping that air traffic controllers around the world buy in.
So is the idea, Ian, that if planes are tracked continuously like this around the world, that they can't just disappear like MH370 did?
Which is the question a lot of people ask about this. Now, here's the thing. For some reason, on MH370, somebody wanted that jet to escape detection, right? No radio calls were made.
Yep.
The transponder, which communicates with ground radar, was turned off. And so there is a device on passenger jets that sends the data to the Aerion satellite. So in that very rare case, that once-in-a-generation case that someone wants to disable that, presumably they could.
You're really smart about airplanes. I appreciate that about you. Still ahead on The National. As Canada grows into legalization, we check out wineries in California where vintners are switching out grapes for grass.
Plus, Apple says if your iPhone won't turn on, your photos and data are lost. Meet the woman who says they're wrong.
In your experience, what percentage of phones in that condition can be recovered?
95%.
How it works, next. But first,
in case you missed it, a 7-year-old BC boy is recovering from a cougar attack on Friday. His father, Kevin Bromley, talked about it today.
He just thought it was a dog, right? Didn't pay too much attention to it, and then it charged him, right? He had a hoodie on, and it was kind of over his neck, but it wasn't over his head, and it started to maul him, sort of thing, right? Got one on the crown, but the hoodie kind of protected the rest of his body.
He describes his wife's incredible intervention when she saw what was happening.
By that point, it had latched onto his forearm, and it obviously wasn't letting go. And so she jumps it, and then she's trying to pry its mouth off of him, right?
The boy has been recovering at his grandmother's.
That was pretty close to near death, so he's old enough to grasp that. And it's a big pill to swallow just to digest that mentally. I mean, when I got to the hospital, I bawled, because he's just covered in blood, right?
But Bromley is grateful for the level of care. He even spared a thought for the cougar.
If it was poaching, if it was hunting where someone took out the mother, then it makes you think, because then it's encroachment upon their territory as well.
We've all been there, that moment of dread as your phone slips out of your hand down somewhere. Maybe you'd rather not really admit. And in a crash of splash, priceless memories gone, not to mention hundreds of dollars as well. That's pretty much what happened to a Canadian couple and some precious iPhone photos. And Apple told them nothing could be done to get their data back. But a repair expert we found says most of the time that's just not true, claiming that Apple is misleading customers. Terrence McKenna has been investigating Apple's repair policies and brings us this latest chapter.
St. John's, Newfoundland is the home of Josephine and Dave Billard. They are avid world travelers. Last year, the couple was able to take the trip of a lifetime, spending 5 months on a voyage from Greece through Europe and finishing in Norway, occasionally posting a few photos to Facebook.
Norway, look at that, the fjords. Santorini.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Incredible.
That's incredible.
But the Billards never got around to backing up the rest of the thousands of images they took with their iPhone. When they got back to Newfoundland last summer and went for a canoe ride on this pond near their property, disaster struck.
When we pushed off and you were in the bow and my foot was off center, I didn't hit dead center. Slightly off center, we sent it that way, and then we both corrected the wrong way and over we went.
So we flipped the canoe. The phone went in the pond and went right to the bottom.
I would say we were in 4 or 5 feet of water, but it's amazing how your mind flicks automatically to, oh my gosh, my dad on my phone.
Yeah, well, there were lots of pictures.
In a panic, Josephine contacted Apple and asked what could be done to recover her thousands of precious photos.
We were shocked and surprised that, of course, that the iPhone people and Apple can't help. You know, that they appeared to have they virtually had no interest really in us. They'd like to sell you a new phone right away, but they don't really care so much about the data, and we were more concerned about the data.
Josephine visited other small repair shops in St. John's, but no one was able to help her. Finally, she visited this small company that gave her the name of an expert 3,000 kilometers away near Rochester, New York.
I was very doubtful, but I tried to have hope that we would get them back, but I was, in my heart, I really didn't think I would ever see those photos other than in my mind's eye, truthfully.
Yeah,
This is Honeoye Falls, New York, 30 kilometers outside of Rochester, the home of iPad Rehab, a small business run by Jessa Jones. Many of her customers are surprised to discover that Jessa holds a molecular biology PhD from the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine.
Maybe it's just we clean the connectors.
She studied human genetics. When she moved here and started a family, she somehow started fixing iPads and iPhones.
Now I apply the same sort of analytical reasoning skills and working with things that are really, really small that have no user manual. So now I try to fix iPhones, figure out how they work and how to get them to turn back on when they stop working.
Finally!
All right.
You might wonder how a molecular biologist ended up in this line of work.
Are we supposed to turn these over? Oh, God.
Jessa and her husband Jeff have 4 children, including twins. One day, Jessa was missing her cell phone at home and discovered that the kids were playing with it and somehow dropped it into the toilet.
I tried to plunge it out, tried to auger it out. Hey, Google, how do you take a toilet out of the house?
Time to get Mommy's phone.
Carried it out and put it in the front yard.
1 baby, 2 babies, we're ready to go.
And then I got a sledgehammer and I sledgehammered it.
Look at that.
There was my iPhone.
Joan sacrificed her $100 toilet for a phone that cost several times that amount. Then she went on the internet and taught herself how to repair iPhones. She studied electronics and micro-soldering and eventually figured out how to repair her phone.
No signs of water.
Once she figured that out, she started passing on her skills to other stay-at-home moms in her neighborhood and realized there was a business opportunity here.
I think that women in general are very good at repair. You know, they tend to have the sort of, you know, kind of ability to be very gentle and yet at times apply enough pressure to get things to move around. They're appropriately cautious but also aggressive, and some of those are kind of skills that you develop being a mom.
When the Billards' water-damaged iPhone arrived from Newfoundland, it presented a challenge. We recorded as Jessa called them on FaceTime to share some news.
Hi.
You sent me a phone that's been driving me crazy since August.
There's about 8,000 pictures on there, which mean quite a lot to me.
Yes, I can imagine, because I can tell that your trip looks amazing.
Oh my God, you got my pictures? Oh my
God. So we have all your pictures.
Isn't that beautiful? Oh my
Yes,
God.
so it's all recovered and there were thousands of them.
I grieved over those pictures.
Oh my God, and I suffered because my mom could do it.
Oh.
No, and I grieved over those because I did not think it was possible to get them back. You made my day.
All right, that's what I love to hear. All right, bye-bye, have a good night.
Bye-bye, thank you, fabulous work.
Those are the best moments of my job.
It turns out that the advice the Billards got from Apple about how their pictures were not recoverable is not at all unusual.
The most common answer, and I hear this from customers all the time, is there is no way to get your pictures from your iPhone if it won't turn on. It's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking because it is absolutely not true. Most toilet phones, common family water accidents, most of those are recoverable.
In your experience, what percentage of phones in that condition can be recovered?
95%.
Really?
All right, there we go. Do we have touch?
And she is so sure she charges $300 only if she can get the data back.
So it's good news. You're lucky, Wes. You're lucky you skated by on that one.
Apple makes a show of helping people with troubleshooting their devices. The company runs this online community forum that coaches people to try a restart and not much else. They allow people like Jessa to offer advice to customers. But whenever Jessa tells people online that their devices can actually be easily repaired by someone other than Apple, her advice is quickly removed from the online forum. And then she receives this notice: your account is currently banned.
It felt incredibly unfair given how hard I tried to follow the rules. I've read the terms of use. I have followed the terms of use, to the best of my ability, and then this is the result. They don't want people to know. They don't want people to try to fix their phone to recover the data. They don't care. They blame you. It's your fault.
We double-checked Jessa's claims by contacting the Apple forum ourselves. When we asked what we could do to recover photos from a water-damaged phone, the answer was nothing. They're gone. There is no way to recover any data that was on it, including the photos, that was not already backed up. We wrote again to ask if we should try Jessa's data recovery service. The answer was, not unless you have money to burn. They can't recover your photos. No one can. The data is gone. We also contacted the official site for Apple support and got a similar answer. As the photos weren't backed up, unfortunately there is no way to recover them. When we asked Apple about why they provided false information, they chose not to respond.
To find out if everything from here back.
Jessa Jones says she loves the design of Apple products, but just wishes the company would adjust its corporate culture.
Everything that Apple does kind of goes with that same mindset. If you think of them as, the kind of kid in school that says, hey, you can borrow my crayons, but don't bear down. Just kind of the bossy, controlling, hover mother, and everything they do is just sort of with that attitude. I'd like for somebody to just smack them and say, you're not the boss of me. Let's investigate this guy right here.
For The National,
right.
I'm Terrence McKenna in Honeoye Falls, New York.
All right, everybody understand that? Okay.
Now, if you want to know more about the technical details of how Jessa Jones was able to get that data off the water-damaged phone, we have this extra video on our YouTube channel where she explains all of it. Check it out, and while you're there, you can subscribe, youtube.com/CBC The National. Fixing your phone could get a lot easier for Ontarians if a bill introduced last month passes.
Provide parts to provide diagnostic software, schematics, manuals to ensure that you can repair your product yourself.
And with those often proprietary tools, Ontarians or third-party repair shops can more easily fix a problem on their own. Beyond cost, another big benefit to a law like this would be reducing the serious environmental impact of electronic waste.
Still ahead on The National, going to new heights to give back.
I wanted to share my love for flying and aviation in general with children with disabilities. Yes, he is visually impaired, but yet he can fly an airplane executing my commands. I've never seen anything like it.
Their story is our moment, but first. Tributes today in South Los Angeles for another man who worked hard to give back to kids in his community. Grammy-nominated rapper Nipsey Hussle. He was shot and killed outside his clothing store yesterday. He was supposed to meet LA's police chief today to talk about gang violence and how to help kids. Instead, candles and flowers marked the spot where Nipsey Hussle lost his life. The 33-year-old was outside his clothing store yesterday when he was shot at close range. He's been open about his gang ties in the past, but it's not clear whether that played a role in his death.
He cared about us. I care about him. You don't understand what he meant to us.
He is someone who put our community on the map. People thought that our community was just about violence, and Nipsey put a change to that, and he let them know that even though we're from underprivileged communities of poverty, that we can still become something.
All my life, been grinding all my life.
Nipsey was at the top of his game, fresh off a Grammy nomination for Best Rap Album of the Year. But for people here, he was more than a rapper. He was a community activist.
Well, what I do is clean up, clean windows.
Nipsey owned several businesses on this block and sometimes gave jobs to residents in need.
He got me going. He brought me up, and I love everybody and him.
Nipsey helped out local kids as well. Once he gave every student at the elementary school new shoes and donated money to repair their playground and basketball court.
He was a family man, a businessman, an entrepreneur, a leader who our youth could look up to and know that no matter what your setback was in life, there's always a greater comeback for you.
Nipsey's killer is still on the loose, a source telling the LA Times that the motive was likely a personal feud. Nipsey's last tweet, posted shortly before he died, read, "Having strong enemies is a blessing." We're watching development tonight in the fentanyl crisis. China has announced it will crack down on the manufacturing of the drug. Starting May 1st, all fentanyl variants will be classified as controlled, and tougher rules around drug exports will be enforced. The announcement fulfills a promise that Chinese President Xi Jinping made to Americans last year. Both Canada and the U.S. have seen thousands of fentanyl-related deaths over the past few years. The Speaker of British Columbia's legislature says women will now be allowed to bear their arms at work. This comes after last week's protest, which saw a number of women complain they were being told to cover up. A full dress code review is underway, but in the meantime, women are allowed to wear business apparel, including sleeveless dresses and tops. A day after the Canadian Women's Hockey League announced it would be shutting down, members of the championship-winning Calgary Inferno say they aren't giving up on professional women's hockey in Canada.
It's a waste and a missed opportunity and a disservice to communities across North America to not invest in women's hockey right now. There has to be professional hockey up here. There has to be professional hockey in Calgary, and there has to be professional hockey in Canada. There's too much of a need. There's too many good players for everyone to disperse and go other places.
The 12-year-old league had teams in North America and China this past season. Despite a recent surge of popularity, it says its business model is unsustainable and will cease operations May 1st. There is another women's pro league in North America, the NWHL, which currently operates only in the United States. Well, today, for the first time in Ontario, some people could walk into a store and buy legal recreational cannabis.
I've never smoked pot or anything, so I'm interested in trying this, and I like the fact that they have broken it down into something you can do at a dinner party, something to do on a walk.
Only 10 shops were set to open today, fewer than the government's initial goal of 25. Ontario is behind other provinces in establishing storefronts. Across the country, recreational cannabis has been legal since last October, and Statistics Canada has been keeping track. In the last quarter of 2018, Canadians spent $307 million on legal product and $1.2 billion on illegal product. So criminals commanded 79% of the market, but that's down from 90% when medical marijuana was the only legal option. StatsCan warns some numbers are self-reported, so not definitive. California legalized pot sales last year, and grape growers in wine country have been lured by the promise of bigger returns. But a new report suggests supply is getting dangerously high. Kim Brunhuber looks at who might get crushed by a crash.
An exclusive dinner in San Francisco. 24 or so customers here to experience a culinary phenomenon so new there doesn't seem to be a word for it yet. What is the right verb for pairing not 2, but 3 things together? The first course, celery root matched with a glass of Pinot Gris, and a toke of Master OG.
So give it a good swirl, and then you want to smell.
Jamie Evans, who's hosting the event, spent over a decade in the wine world.
And then what I like to do is move on to the strain.
But she's evolved into a new hybrid.
I actually like to smell it better in the jar.
A herb sommelier.
Over the past year, I've definitely seen the two industries come closer together because there are a lot of parallels between the industries.
In fact, out here in Sonoma County, wine country is slowly turning into cannabis country. You see here right in front of me, a winery is growing grapes, and then just right across the road behind that gate, a company is growing cannabis at an industrial scale. Here at the intersection of California's iconic wine country and the so-called Emerald Triangle, epicenter of the state's $5 billion cannabis industry, some grape growers started wondering. They have the land, they have the know-how, why not diversify by growing cannabis and cash in on the green rush? 1 hectare of grapes here in Sonoma County can be worth up to $460,000 US, but the same area of cannabis can be worth as much as $2.75 million. Tom Rodriguez owns Maple Creek Winery. He also grows small amounts of cannabis. Because it's still illegal at the federal level, he's not keen to show it on TV. But he says he's far from the only one around here growing both.
Although they're just not all out. You know, a lot of them are still in the closet, so to speak.
When California legalized cannabis in 2018, grape prices were at the lowest level in years. And pot prices were so high, Rodriguez says, many grape growers started doing the math.
You're growing cannabis at $250 a pound that's ready in 8 months, or Pinot Noir that's ready in a year and a half at $2 a pound. You're a farmer. What are you going to do? Seems like a no-brainer.
The problem is California's cannabis growers are now producing too much pot, at least 5 times the amount that's actually consumed. Some in the industry are predicting a so-called extinction event, which only the biggest companies will survive. Any small grape grower who invested heavily in cannabis, Rodriguez says, could be snuffed out.
There's always that risk in a new industry like this. Personally, I just want to wait and see. Well, this is our double gold winner.
So Rodriguez says for now he'll carry on selling wine and keep his weed for friends and family. Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, Mendocino County, California.
Next on The National, our moment, a high-flying way to give back.
It's a pretty nice view out the window, eh?
Yeah. You can see it, can you?
Yeah.
Awesome, buddy.
Their story right after this. Dmitry Neonakis has been flying planes as a hobby for about 20 years. But Dmitry doesn't just fly planes. He actually runs a program called Dream Wings that gives children with special needs or just kids who've never been in a plane a chance to go up for a ride, like Luke Reddick here, the most recent co-pilot. Luke has a visual impairment, but that didn't stop him from flying. Luke's turn to take to the skies is our moment.
Pretty exciting. I can't wait to start flying.
I wanted to share my love for flying and aviation in general with children with disabilities. We give them the opportunity to be a pilot for an hour. I met Luke in 2017, and he has a visual impairment.
It's a pretty nice view out the window, eh?
Yeah. You can see it, can you?
Yeah.
Awesome, buddy. He took a turn to the left, and then he took a turn to the right, and I noticed that he was holding altitude, and he was flying like a professional pilot. And every time I fly with him, he's funny, he's delightful, a great pilot.
Turn right. There you go. Very nice, bud. You're doing awesome today, man.
Woohoo!
Well, I love Luke, but Dmitry has done this in the 18 months since he started doing it. He's taken 350 kids on 250 flights. That's a pretty cool way to practice and get up there in the skies.
Yeah, well, great for Dimitri, and what a fantastic view from that front seat sitting next to the pilot. It's one of the great things about this job. I've had the opportunity to do that so many times, heading to and from certain stories, especially in the interior of BC. So I hope that people watching this who, fly to get their hours in their private plane, take a page out of Dimitri's book and offer flights to people who normally wouldn't get a chance to do that.
Lovely
I think that
idea.
would be a fantastic thing.
Yep.
And that's no joke. That is The National for Monday, April the 1st. Good night.
Good night.